Hello, everybody. My name's Joshua. I am the founder and director of El Terreno Cultural Exchange Center out here in the beautiful Ecuadorian Andes. Fantastic to have you here on the call for our first webinar of 2025. These webinars are something that we've been talking about and planning over the last few months to bring some of the knowledge and the wisdom that our interns get when they come and arrive here on site and participate in our projects. But we wanted to share some of that knowledge with people elsewhere in the world. And so this is the first, hopefully, of many. And we've been working closely with Sebastian here, who's been developing something really interesting. I think you guys are going to love it. So yeah, Sebastian Calero, I'll let him do his own self-presentation, but he's been working with us right from the beginning of El Terreno, helping us with a lot of the design and the building of the infrastructure we've got here at the project. He's got many years working as an architect, working as a mentor, and very happy for the work that he's done to pull together this presentation to share with you all. So we'll have opportunity to do questions and answers at the end, but for now, I will pass over to you, Sebastian.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. I will share my presentation. Well, hi everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this webinar and to be able to present some experiences during these last few years. Also, I would like to thank El Terreno and Joshua for this invitation, and of course, all of you for being present. I will try to be brief with the topics and that I'm going to talk about. And at the end, it would be fantastic to receive opinions, questions, or comments. The name of the presentation is Vernacular Architecture, Some Lessons from Ecuador, is the work that we have been doing during this time in Guaranda, in Atandawa. And of course, I want to share more topics related with the vernacular architecture. Um, the presentation has four steps. The first one is a personal background. The second, some problems, definitions, references that can be useful for you. Projects that we are developing, and the last one is some conclusions in order to be clear with the presentation. Well, my name is Sebastián Calero Larrea. I'm Ecuadorian, architect and lover of artistic expression. Um, I understand architecture as a huge matrix in which I try to combine not only architecture, but geography, photography, cinema, visual arts, sculpture, every artistic expression. Also, I think in this matrix it's important to understand some words, for example, rurality, urban peripheries, territorial waste, architectural ruins, architectural systems, of course, our vernacular architecture. And during the last 20 years, I think, when I finished my studies as architect, I have a really interest in understand the non-architects and the imperfection of the landscapes and these vulnerable landscapes. I think it's important trying to understand some references that for me were important at the beginning of my career. And when I was 18 years old, I went 1 year to Austria, and I found this artist whose name is Hundar Basa. Hundar Basa was a polyphacetic artist, also an architect, an activist, an ecologist, and he tried to combine all his interests in order to understand sustainable architecture. I think he was a really advanced person for this moment, and he was like my guide at the beginning of my career, and all the time I think I must mention this guy. Um, I think also it's important at the beginning of this presentation, try to understand how are the creativity process, because I think whatever in the field that you are working, I think it's important try to understand your obsessions on how are you working with these obsessions. When I'm talking about obsessions, I'm talking about also singular actors or secondary actors, films, books, verbs, actions, and whatever. It's important to your to your concepts. So that's maybe could be my map. It's a map that all the time is growing, because all this information is in your head. So I think it's important to understand how are the creative process in your brain. Um, Also, part of my work is related with landscape. I think landscapes are really important part of the context. And I think that landscape is like a crime scene in which you have um, the body, you have the blood, you have a lot of parts of the body. I think that's the landscape for me. And when I'm talking about vernacular architecture, I think it's important try to understand where it's located and um, from which context is located this architecture. So that's really important. During the last years, I have traveled a lot in my country. I live between Quito, the capital, and Guaranda. It's capital of one province, and I think there's a lot of huge information that sometimes we don't observe, but I think it's important to stop, observe, analyze, and systematize all the information. For me, this information is related also with rural concepts, colors, patterns, textures, objects, um, topographies, new topographies, post-industrial places, and all kind of elements that are important in order to generate concepts and strategies for future projects. Um, Also, I draw a lot with this information. I draw a lot, and I create like this kind of monsters, um, kind of fantasies, which every draw contains a lot of concepts, a lot of strategies also that I can use in the future. Finally, projects come a project comes true, but it's important to understand that every process has a time, and and that's the field where I'm moving right now, on a small scale projects, trying to understand the combination of materials, um, trying to be honest with resources, also with the economy. And this is a project that I built 7 years ago, in which I try to combine, for example, metal with bricks, trying to understand how the object is touching the ground, and how we can integrate the nature with the architecture. That's the field where I move right now. But also, I think it's important to compare different contexts, for example, and how people understand architecture from different contexts. And in this road that I travel all the time from Quito to Aranda, I can observe different typologies and architectures that for me it's really important. It's a really important information for my work. And I think you can see how development is is touching rural areas, and that's really important because I'm trying to understand how the influence of the city is touching rural areas. That's the main work that I'm trying to study right now. And to understand better this phenomenon, I think I recommend you this amazing documentary film, Anthropocene. Anthropocene is a new geological epoch characterized by the impact of the man on the earth. Edward Burtynsky, one of these filmmakers, and is also a great photographer, and he tries to explain how humans um, how we are destroying the planet and how we are what we are doing with the resources. And I think it's a really good movie to understand what is happening with our planet. And this photo is the conclusion of what is happening in our countries. How the highlands for the how highways are dividing territories in order to increase population or density. And that's what happening, I think, in every country. Sometimes we don't feel that, but I think it's important to understand the influence of development in rural areas. But what is sustainable architecture? Um, to sum up, sustainable architecture is a design and construction approach that seeks to reduce environmental impact, optimize the use of natural resources, and promote human well-being, creating efficient, ecological, and healthy spaces. It's like a table with three legs, and every leg has a function, and every function must work together. Also, it's a combination between practices, policies, and actions in order to understand the present and the future generations. And if we try to combine the meaning of vernacular architecture with the sustainable architecture, there's a close relationship with the concepts because vernacular architecture is a traditional building style that uses native materials and techniques, and they try to adapt to the climate, environment, and cultural needs of a specific region. So that's to sum up what's the meaning of vernacular architecture. And vernacular, you can find vernacular architecture everywhere in your country, in your town, and you can see different techniques on how architecture is related with memory and with the yeah, memory of the culture. No? For example, what's happening in the Amazonas, for example, with these traditional houses, is like they build this all the infrastructure from the elements that they have in the forest. For example, all the columns are from the trees. On the all the cover of all the skin of the roof comes also from the trees. So, and also try to understand this space in the middle, like a big garden, like a big place in where people interchange products and they create community. Um, that's happening in my country, for example, near to Quito, where we still have small towns, but these small towns are being part of the big city. So it's interesting to understand how these small towns are are creating a battle against the big city. For example, that's happening in Iceland or Finland, where where they use stone from the ground and trying to understand like a similar scheme It's like a invisible architecture in landscape. So they are using only stone, wood, and earth. And I think also important try to put in like a reference some artists that they work all the time with materials that they found in one place. For example, Mario Hertz was an Italian artist, and all the time he built igloos, different kind of igloos, and with stones and different kinds of stones, and it's really interesting how he joined the different parts of the stones. Or for example, Andy Goldsworthy is a landscape artist, a artist, sorry, and he all the time is thinking about materials that he has in the context, and he tried to make art elements, ephemeral elements that only have a period of time and disappear in time. Or there's more technical references. For example, Martin Rauch is an Austrian architect. He works with earth. He understands industrialized process with earth, and obviously the walls are produced in a fabric, and they join with like a blocks. And in order to understand what's the meaning of the vernacular architecture and how we are translate some specific concepts, we have created with El Terreno a vernacular architecture laboratory in which we are trying to work with communities, with volunteers also, and we have some specific cases that I would like to show you. Well, this is a small map in order to understand the concept of the highlands in Ecuador. Quito, um, Quito and Guaranda, maybe 230 kilometers. This is the road that I show you in which I'm trying to compose an atlas, an album of objects and vernacular architecture. And and Atandawa is in a small community near to Guaranda. Um, is a community where the terreno is located. And and during the last few years, we are trying to mapping some architectures that sometimes are abandoned because of the migrations. And there are a lot of infrastructures that doesn't have services, um, are like a ruins in the landscape, and we are trying to convince the owners to fix some of these houses because we understand that these elements in the landscape, I mean, these architectures in the landscape has a lot of value, but most of the time people don't value these architectures. It's like a garbage, or because they think that the new architecture is the only that has a validation. So we are trying to to convince people that this architecture has a lot of value and is the memory of the place. That's our battle right now. Um, we have we walk a lot in the landscape, as you can admire. This is Atandawa. You can see the architecture that is located in the field, a lot of crops. Um, we walk, sometimes we walk in groups in order to, to recognize a lot of architectonic elements. Um, and this is one of it was the first project that we were working. Is the main house en el terreno. It was a 100 years old house, which was abandoned. All the structure was damaged. So the main part of the house were all the boundaries, all the with earth. So we tried to rescue all the boundaries, and and of course, every house has a memory, has a history, has a lot of elements, has a lot of skins, a lot of layers, a lot of parts that we must recognize in this process, because all is information, and we must work with all these elements at the final. Um, there's a really important part in this creative process in which we dream a lot, we create fantasies, we draw, um, in order to imagine how we could combine an old and new architecture. It's a really heavy work, it's a really hard work in order to understand two moments, the past and the present. Um, in this case, um, was really important trying to understand the empty space and how the boundaries try to compose the different dimension of the space. And, and the final intervention is trying to put a new structure that combines with an old one. In this case, we combine earth with wood. Um, that's the process when we work together with friends, with people from the community, with foreign volunteers, um, in order to understand the different process of building a house. As you can see, the house is taking a proportion and a scale, and we can see how the different materials are being combined. Well, this is almost the final result, in which we we can see the different parts of the architecture. An old one, which is related with the earth, with the rammed earth, and the other one, the new skeleton of the house, the new part that only touch some parts of the old house. Some examples of interior space, and also we try to understand more possibilities with materials. In this case, for example, bottles, and, and also um, understand the different skins of the walls, because a wall has different skins, um, and I think that's important because it's also related with comfort of the house. Then this is another example, and this is also this house has a history, a memory. It was an abandoned house, um, and the owner, she went to United States in the 2 years ago, I think. And this house was abandoned, and we found the opportunity of give to give a second use to this house. This is a typical house in Atandawa, in the middle of the of the land. Um, it was the initial conditions, a house without light, um, a lot of darkness in the spaces. The second floor was what was not finished. So we must to analyze all the case of a study in order to act in the future. Um, this project we developed with volunteers from Holland, from Germany, from Sweden, and a lot of volunteers from United Kingdom that they they came to help us in all the process. And yeah, that's the main concept of the main concepts of the project, trying to understand new spaces, how to join new spaces with old ones, try to put a light inside, how we could create new spaces for sleeping, and all the time trying to understand the influence of this vernacular architecture and the influence on the nature and the landscape in the project. This is the final result, a three-dimensional model, and also we work with physical models in order to understand the complexity of the project and the different solutions that we can have in the on the road. This is the almost, I think, almost the final result because we don't finish yet the final project, but we can see how we join another part, how we put light inside of the spaces, and yeah, this is another view. Try to understand the different layers of the wall because and try to repair, try to fix all the walls also. This small balcony in order to admire the Chimborazo, the different views of the landscape. This is what what's happening right now in the second floor. Small interventions with huge impact. I think that's all objective. Small actions, but big impact in the space or in the form sometimes. We are really happy because it was a really hard work trying to coordinate all the problems, all the economical resources, materials, manage all the people. It's not easy. So I think we create a really green team of workers. And the project I think is an amazing has an amazing result. And the last example that I want to show you is a project that I built recently with my family. It's near to Atandawa. It's in front of Atandawa, I mean. It's located in a small community called Paltabamba, where my grandmother has a small part of land, a piece of land, I mean. The project called La Era is the place where crops were harvested in the summer. So normally they used to build a small refugee for the people, and with this concept, we designed and we built with my family a small refugee. And all the time for me, this is the information that the most prestige information that I can get from the context, from the landscape. These small houses, small elements that are floating in the ground. For me, is an inspiration that I can I can work with this these ideas. I try to transform. I try to understand new new elements or new forms, new proportions, new scales. Um, it's a small refugee. It's just a place for sleeping or just to being there one weekend. And it's important we how we can imagine this new space in the landscape. And the main idea of the project is trying to create a primitive space. That was the main idea. Trying to disconnect from the modernity because in the place you don't have electricity, you have water, but not too much water. But the main object is trying to create a primitive space for people that live in the city. This is the final result. As I told you, we use materials from the sun, from this area, trying to understand another way to cooking, to sleeping, just to relax, um, and obviously all the time trying to integrate architecture with nature. The final object is like an insect. Sometimes touch the earth, sometimes it doesn't touch the earth. Also, we recycled some elements. For example, the chimenea, we recycled this element. And you can see how the project is part of the landscape. Big windows in order to understand light and relationship between exterior and interior spaces. And just to finalize my presentation, I would like to give you some conclusions. What I'm trying to do is not reproduce the architecture of the past. What I am trying to do is working with this memory, but trying to playing just what I'm trying to do is trying to create new games with this memory, trying to use these elements in order to understand new possibilities of architecture, but thinking about the present. And I think there are a lot of examples, great examples. For example, this small cabin that is designed by Renzo Piano is a really famous Italian architect, and his team, obviously. And they try to understand these small places for living, um, but thinking about the future, thinking about the resources like electricity, water, and obviously try mm, to design compact spaces. But I think there's a close relationship with architecture that you find in rural areas. Also, I think vernacular architecture is these photos from China, and you can find a lot of examples from China in which there are a lot of houses that are resisting against the big companies, and I think that's happening in our cities, in which the modernity is replacing the memory of the context. Um, and I think also it's important thinking about resources, materials. Um, I think that's a really important aspect in the sustainable architecture and vernacular architecture because all is money, time is money, and materials also are money. And I think that we should create new objects thinking about resources. I think it's a really important aspect at least in my profession, and how we can introduce and respect nature in cities and in rural areas. This is Hunda Basa again. He was a pioneer of ecologist movement, and look how he understand the roots of the trees in order to to solve a problem, but also being respectful with the landscape. And I think that's an amazing example of how nature is part of the city, but sometimes we don't understand how to combine this nature with concrete or with artificial elements. Um, and just to at the final, these two photos, how cities are increasing population, which are your case of study, or in which city are you living, how you compare with this photo, I think is in Laos, in which the living conditions are really um, difficult. And on the other side, how development is destroying the landscape. For me, it's a traumatic experience watching this kind of photos, because humans are we are destroying the planet. And for example, this in Chile, and how the lithium mines are part of the landscape. It's a terrific image for me. And try also to understand your landscapes, and try to see with other eyes, try to observe and analyze what is happening in your context, because you for sure you will have a lot of the information that sometimes just you don't see, but it's in invisible information that you must discover. And at the final, I think um, I think it's really important observe, analyze different layers of the context in order to develop more sensitivity. Because in my case, like, I in my profession, I think it's really important to have um, uh, or try to configure out this matrix with a lot of information. But if you don't have sensitivity, it's complicated, because context has a lot of layers, a lot of information that sometimes we must discover. Well, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. I hope this information helps you to understand better the context of vernacular architecture and the things that we are doing in Ecuador, especially in Bolivar, is the province where it's located, at Tandahua and Paltabamba and Guaranda, the capital of the province. And I hope you come to visit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian, for really insightful presentation. Um, I'm not an architect myself, but I can only put myself in the position of those who are studying, and I think it's a really great window into the world of the work that you're doing, and the life that's out here, and also the aspirations of what's possible. So I really appreciate that. Um, we've got a few minutes for questions. If anybody has got anything, then you can either write it in the chat or you can raise your hand. In the meantime, I've got a couple of questions, so I might start with one. Sebastian, can you tell us a little bit about your process of how you go through the analysis of an old building that you want to transform, and then what are the steps that you take in the design and the building process?
Okay. Mm, well, to be honest, I think every project has a personality. Not every project is the same. I think it's a different case of a study. Um, in this case, for example, El Terreno, it was really important to try to understand the um, the old architecture and what are the new possibilities to understand the new architecture. For example, in this case, as I told you, we have a boundaries that we didn't want to touch. The boundaries are the memory of the house, and our challenge was try to create a new architecture um, that combines with this old one. And as you can see, in this part of the process, that's I think the second part of the process in which we take off all the clothes of the body in order to understand the the main body of the project and the different skins, the different elements. Um, because these old houses, they have history, they have memory, they have information that sometimes we don't see. We must touch the house, we must touch the walls in order to understand the complexity of the project. And there's a third step, I think, in which I must talk with my client in order to understand necessities, in order to understand all the possibilities of the project, the scale of the project, the different dimensions with the space, how with this new skeleton we are satisfying all the necessities of my client. And the big challenge of this project, as I told you, was trying to understand this new structure with the old one. The the old one structure was an irregular structure, which was really complicated to draw to work there was really complicated, and how this new one, this new skeleton was able to create new spaces inside and a new form outside. Um, yeah, you can see in the process maybe there's also a process in which we must build the ideas with strategies and, for example, try to understand the empty space and how this new skeleton conforms the new architecture. And that's the final result, how we are combining periods of time, an ancestral moment and a present moment honesty with yeah, I mean an architecture that it doesn't it doesn't wants only a form, but it is an architecture that wants to invent new spaces inside. It's like it's like a magical box in which you have a lot of new spaces that sometimes you don't see. You must walking around and figure out all the different spaces. Well, what I'm trying to explain you is that architectonic process are not linear, are sometimes are really mm, confused, are organic process that all the time are is changing, um, and I cannot I cannot explain with the same way all the projects because, as I told you, every project has a different moment, a different inspiration, different resources, different landscape. Every project is a different film, and every film has different scripts. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question. What's the we've got a question from Olympia first. how long did you spend on each part of these projects, from concept design to development and construction?
Mm, well, I think it also depends of the complexity of the project. Um, because there are projects that are more clear. You have a light at the final. Sometimes it depends also the what's your relationship with clients, your capacity of generate concepts, your capacity of generate strategies, and but maybe one project can take between 2 or 3 months in order to order all ideas, in order to create a big constellation of ideas, big constellation of concepts, and yeah, you have different steps in the project. I mean, in the creative process, um, but depends of the complexity. I cannot tell you. With I cannot tell you exactly how many weeks I need to understand or create concepts. It's impossible, I think.
And one more question for me. What's the difference for you between doing a building project like this, where you're renovating uh, an old, often earth building, to building something completely new using conventional materials such as concrete and metal?
Mhm. Um, I think when you are working with a with a build project, I think the rules of the game are different because in some way you should adapt um, elements to the, or you should adapt or combine um, new elements with old elements. Um, I think you should find a perfect combination between the different layers of the project. When I'm talking about layers or components, I'm talking about structure, boundaries, space, um, proportion, scale. Uh, That's when I'm talking about these components that are important. Um, and you have different rules of the game, I think. When you are talking about a new object, in some way could be easier because you don't have the conditions of this existing building. Um, but also it's not easy because sometimes the conditions are different. For example, the condition could be the complexity of the landscape, resources, um, spatial complexity. So I think in in these two cases, I think is the same difficulty to work. I think it's just different. The ways are different, but I think it's not easy to work. I mean, it's you will have a lot of difficulties in order to understand these two ways of architecture. It's not um, it's not easy.
Thank you, Sebastian. We've got another question from Michele.
Thank you, Sebastian, for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, so since I come from a small city, but I've lived in big cities, I've always seen this contrast between new architecture and old architecture. I was thinking how someone that is not into the architecture world can introduce small things of vernacular architecture in a city. So, like if I want to build like if I want to improve my garden, but I want to do it with natural fancy natural materials and things like that. How can I do that in a cities where materials like that are not available or not easy to find?
Well, I think um, all the time you will have the chance to put these techniques and materials that you are not really common in big cities. I think it's possible to find. I think it's not. That's not the problem. Maybe um, because you can go outside of the city and you can find these materials and put inside of the city. I think it's not the big problem. I think the big problem is that m- most of the time we don't value this architecture. Um, we prefer concrete. We prefer simple forms or simplicity in order to this old architecture. And I think that's the big problem because if you see, for example, in our country, we have a really problem with patrimonial houses in small towns or small cities like Guaranda, for example, that the influence of development, the influence of the big city in small cities is incredible. And people just don't want to live in old houses. They prefer new architecture. But the problem is, what is the new architecture? That's the big problem. Or how can you define the new architecture that can be responsible with the historic areas or historic context or with the memory of the city? I think that's the big problem. Getting the materials, I think, is not a problem, or I think it's not the big problem. I think, as I told you, how new generations are also respectful with the old traditions, with the memory of the cities. And that's also happening, for example, in rural areas, that because houses are abandoned because of migrations. But when people come back to these rural spaces, just they destroy the house and they put an old one with a new structure, a new form, as forms that comes from the city, and they don't have any relationship with nature, with landscape, with resources, with the community. So I think that's the big problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are out of time. If anybody still has further questions that haven't been answered, I invite you to send me an email, joshua@elterrenoecuador.com, and I'll make sure that it gets answered for you. Sebastian, thank you so much for taking the time to build such a
No,
comprehensive
thank you,
and
Joshua.
fascinating presentation. And yeah, I mean, I'm literally sat in the building that you're seeing on the screen, and it's I feel a huge privilege to have worked with you and to continue developing these really fascinating, interesting, and as you say, culturally significant projects here. Would you like to say anything final before we finish?
No, thanks for your invitation. I think for me it's a pleasure express all my my experience, my process. Um, and I think it's amazing how we can share all this information in this webinar. And I hope we will have more events like that in order to um, to understand better different process in El Terreno also.
Absolutely. Yes. As I said at the beginning, this is the first of many presentations that we plan, and maybe you come back and do another one for us, Sebastian. So
For sure.
if you'd like to stay up to date with that, follow us on our social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram at El Terreno Guaranda. And also you can visit our website, www.elterrenoecuador.com, And if you're interested in coming joining for an internship or another program, you can arrange a call with me and we can have more of a chat. Thank you, everybody who's come and joined us today. It was great having you here. Special thanks to Michele for making sure it all gets organized. Fantastic. Looking forward to seeing you all on the next one. Hasta luego.
Thank you. Thanks
Okay.
very much.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Joshua.